Welcome back to the Nullified Take channel here on YouTube, also streaming live today on Twitter. We're back to talk about the finale of Survivor 43. That's right, I'm your host, Chris, and with me today is my two co-hosts for the day, Jake, who's been with us the whole season. Mucky is also here today. He's going to be a part of the team as we cover Australian Survivor, so no better way for him to get involved as we head towards Australian Survivor next. But Jake, I'm going to come over to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. This finale was very interesting, so I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about it.
I feel like we may have some differing opinions, which is going to be awesome.
I think so too, yeah.
I think that'll be awesome. I've had a very brief discussion with Mucky before we went live, and I think it's going to be interesting to hear his take on it as well. But Mucky, welcome to the live. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, mate. You know, it's been quite an intense fast week for me. I recently turned 21, got back from America, so I'm really glad to be on this podcast chatting some Survivor for you guys.
Congratulations. So wait, you left America when you turned 21. I mean, it's when you get 21 over in America when you can have the most fun.
Yeah, exactly. So I left like a few days before I turned 21, and as soon as our plane took off, I just turned 21. So,
well, congratulations.
Bit of a doozy. Oh, cheers, brother.
Happy belated birthday.
Cheers, man.
Well, listen, what a finale. I want to say hello to everybody here in the live. We've got Zulu Man, the Harvester, saying Kane is going to be a stud for season 44. Watch out. I haven't actually checked out much for season 44 yet, but I'll take your word for it. Christian Gal, welcome back. And also Dolores, welcome back to the live. Yes, hi all. And Jay says we all got Gabler read.
Like an alligator.
All I'm going to say, and before we get too much into it, on this podcast, I know that I've been calling for about 3 weeks now that Gabler is the second most likely person to win. I say Jesse, hands down, but if Gabler gets to the end and Jesse doesn't get there, I think Gabler is going to win it. So I wasn't as shocked with the end result as it seemed like all of the internet was. It seemed like everybody on the cast themselves, that were in the finale, Owen and Cassidy, everybody was quite shocked by the end result. I wasn't personally too shocked by it. Jake, how did you feel about this ending, seeing an unlikely winner take it out at the end?
So I always like winners like this, and I feel like we've had 3 very unique winners in this new era, like very unique and very different, especially compared to each other. So it's cool to see that as always. And also, I just think that, it was interesting to see that like no one saw this coming at all, like biggest shock ever. But then you and I feel like we've been
calling it for ages. Yeah. And I saw comments online. Where people said that the podcasters, specifically pointing out Rob as a podcast, all the different podcasts on there, they all were on Cassidy for a very long time, because I couldn't understand when people got into the live and they kept saying Cassidy, watch out for Cassidy. And I was like, I don't see it. I don't see how Cassidy is winning this season, but maybe there's some spoilers out there and people are on Cassidy because she does end up winning. And it wouldn't have been that big of a shock. Someone's got some sirens going on in the background there.
That's me. Sorry, mate. I live in the big city. Everyone's dangerous.
All right. I'll put you on mute for a second. As we do this, like, listen, I was not as shocked about this. I wasn't as shocked about it because I think that we've been calling for a while. There's a possibility that Gabler could win. Gabler has definitely, throughout the season, they definitely showed us that what the strategy was for him, where he was going. In the beginning of the season, pre-merge, 100%. Both you and I, Jake, we didn't think he had a chance pre-merge.
Yeah, he was a big big wreck in the pre-merge, but as he says, he realized that the alligator needs to go underwater, and he saw that he was too out in the open, too much of a open target. So what a bizarre season.
Yeah, Dolores here says, day one I saw Gabler and said, no way he's going to the final. He's dragged. So needless to say, I was mistaken. Kudos to him. And that's the thing. We've spoken about this quite a lot, Mucky. In the new era of Survivor, the pre-merge is so short. It is so short. It almost does not matter how you do in the pre-merge. It's all about the post-merge. And post-merge, he did make a big move. He did go for his adversary, and Ali, the person who he thought was coming after him. And he was right. You know, she maybe didn't look through the bag, but she definitely had, I think, the potential to turn a lot of people against them. He ended up taking her out very early on, then sort of submerged underwater and just made sure he had all these great alliances and these social connections that could carry him into the end. And that's why, for me, I wasn't surprised seeing that people liked him, because we constantly saw him talking to different people and creating bonds with Carla, creating a bond with Ryan, creating a bond with Owen and with Noel. Like, he was constantly in all of these different pockets, and no one seemed to be angry at him because he was never the biggest person making the moves. That was always Jesse and Cody.
Yeah, I'm actually big to differ. I think for the new era, the pre-merge is actually the most important, because most of the strongest alliances, since the game is so short and every tribe is like every second or so day, is like often we've seen throughout the new era, like the Taku 4, like Ricard and Shan, like Coco, Owen and Gabler, all like majority of the alliances are from original tribes, and it's just which groups go together. Is it Cody and Jesse teaming up with Carla and Cassidy? Is it Carla and Cassidy going with Owen and Gabler? Like, it's more of groups shifting around from the pre-merge rather than individuals moving around in pre-merge. I'd say actually the pre-merge, even though it's so short, is actually the most important, because they set up the major alliances for basically the entire game, because they often last till the very end. So yeah,
it's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that, because I kind of feel like with the shorter pre-merge, we're now seeing the most fluid game we've ever seen post-merge. Like, we don't see alliances stick together anymore. We don't see people hang. Like, there's always the tight twos, or the tight two people within those groups that are working, but we don't get the old school alliances. We don't get the Pagoning of back in the day, where just one alliance dominates and runs through the end. It makes for a lot more of a fluid game. I do still think you're right, though. Obviously, building social connections, pre-merge is still very important. It's a very important part of the game. But when I sort of mentioned that, I feel like the pre-merge for me doesn't matter as much, is because people didn't really hold it against Gabler that he was willing to go to shot in the dark, and that he was willing to, flush his own idol out, basically, which all of us in the beginning were like, this is a bad move. This is going to reflect badly on him. But people didn't really care, because a lot of people weren't in that first tribe that happened. They only have a picture of the Gabler that they saw at the merge, and that was the thing that stuck in their head when they had to go and vote at the end here. Jake, with the way that it turned out, and them getting into the finale here, Gabler, really made a strong case at the end, because he really tapped back on all of these social connections when Final Tribal Council was going on as well. And he said, I had the Baka boys, I had the Ride or Die Alliance. I thought there was one point there that was a little bit weak for me in his argument. Like, listen, I'm a big fan of Gabler's win, and we'll talk about that towards the end. I'm really happy he won. I wasn't like the rest of the internet that were like, oh no, everything is wrong, Survivor is broken, which I think is really hypocritical. Actually, let's get into this first. The same people who called out Russell Hines for saying that the juries shouldn't be all together, they shouldn't talk, and then decide who wins the end of the game. The same people who said Russell was mad for saying that are now saying the jury should be sequestered so that Cassidy could win, so that people couldn't be poisoned. Isn't that a little bit hypocritical, Jake?
Well, definitely. I mean, yeah, it's when the under the radar queen female gets screwed is when it's bad. I think that that's just a part of the game. I mean, if you're gonna have it for 43 seasons, we might as well just keep it going, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of a sticky situation, sticky topic. I don't know really how to address that. But yeah, of course it's hypocritical.
Yeah, Jay also says, so true, Chris, so hypocritical, because it's about, when the bad man, Russell, says it that no one likes. Nah, he's wrong. He's wrong about everything he says. Like, listen, Russell's got a lot of flaws. I'm not defending everything about the guy, but I just wanted to call this out specifically. Also here, Insulin Independent said Cassidy just had a bad tribal. Listen, I think she did. And let's talk about it. Where did Cassidy lose this tribal council? I think Cassidy lost this tribal council when she couldn't claim a single move. She couldn't claim a move that she did on her own that other people didn't think of prior to her or she wasn't a part of. And that's very difficult in Survivor to say, I did this move on my own. Like when Jesse stole the idol off Cody and he ended up blindsiding, well, he didn't really steal it, but he used it against Cody. It's very hard. So I feel like that's where Cassidy potentially lost. She didn't really articulate her game, or her game didn't translate to the jury in a way where they were like, yeah, I feel good about Cassidy, because Cassidy was always a third or fourth person in the plan.
I think it's really hard because it's a situation where, because something I found in the new era especially, so there's a lot of really, really massive players, but the thing is that when they make a move, it's their move and they're not willing to share credit about it. And I think the problem with Cassidy is that she wasn't the forefront, so she wasn't one necessarily getting targeted, but she was always more the second in command or like the third in command. So that's why she never really got targeted, unlike James, unlike Carla, and I guess like Cody and Jesse as well. But the problem is that when you get to the end, you can't definitively say, I made this move, because you're always doing more the background work than the front work, if that makes sense.
100%. I mean, there's a few comments coming in now, so we'll read through all of these as best as we can. Sandy says, I mean, in my honest opinion, yes, Survivor is broken, but it's about the fire-making challenge, and yes, Gabler do play the right performance for that specific jury. And that's the thing. Every jury is different. I mean, that's why in a different season, Cassidy could have very easily won. There's people that have done less than Cassidy that have won the show. There are people that have, gotten into an end and was an absolute shock winner for me because they've had even less of an edit than Cassidy. So I think she could have won in a different season. It didn't work here. But let's talk about the fire-making challenge. A lot of people, again, talking about the fire-making challenge being a big thing. There was a lot of controversy around the fire-making challenge because ultimately, I hate the fire-making challenge. I do not like it. I've never liked it. You will never convince me it's a good thing. People will defend it and say, well, without the fire-making challenge, a player like Jesse would never have had a chance. At least he had a chance to try and get to the end. But my thing is, if the fire-making challenge isn't there, the strategy changes. And Jesse probably doesn't get rid of Cody. He probably thinks a little bit differently about what he does moving forward. So people have to adapt to the game in front of them. Jake, how do you feel about the fire-making challenge? Because it did look like people unfairly, we're putting this on Cassidy that she didn't go and make fire, and they were like, because she didn't do this, you don't deserve to win.
Chris, I think this is the thing that I'm most upset about in this finale. Most people are upset that Gabler won and think that Cassidy was robbed. I personally don't feel that way. I believe that Gabler totally deserved his win, and Cassidy, while she played a strong game, I think that she had her chance to win, but I feel like the jury was very unfair to Cassidy with the fire-making challenge. Chris Underwood broke Survivor. He is now set this gold standard. We saw Natalie Anderson in Winners at War, Boston Rob, in his voting confessional said, you would have got my vote if you would have just, you would have put yourself in the fire-making challenge and taken out Tony yourself, which is crazy because she was the first person voted out. And now this season, Cassidy, she wins, and it's like, that's not enough. That's not enough that you won. And my best chance is Gabler. Gabler is good at making fire. So why don't I put the best person to make fire? The reason why Chris put himself in the fire-making challenge is because he's like, I don't trust Gavin or Julie to make fire better than Rick, but I can trust myself to make it better. So boom, I'll do it. That's not the case here. So that really peeved me because, I mean, imagine you're in Cassidy's shoes. They make it sound so easy. Like, just put yourself in the fire-making challenge. But like,
that's crazy. Like why does the fire-making challenge? Listen, I'm with you. I'm pro Gabler winning this season. I'm very happy with a Gabler win, but also I will call out unfairness where I see it. This is an unfair judgment by the jury to say, Cassidy, you had to go in there. I felt Cassidy stood on her own 2 feet and defended her game very well by saying, I don't feel like I need to go in there. I feel proud about what I did. Maybe she fell a little bit short at the end in pitching her game, and maybe she definitely underestimated the likes of Gabler going into the finale.
Yeah.
But I think overall, for me, for them to say you have to go into the fire, what makes the fire making challenge more important than actually clutching out the final immunity win? Immunity wins, Mucky, used to count for something. Being able to win that final clutch immunity used to give you credit, and she did win a combined a third of all of the immunities this season. Put some respect on her name. She was a challenge beast this season.
Oh, absolutely. Massive challenge beast, and I also agree it was extremely unfair to really put that on her. But I think a sort of problem in New Era Survivor as well is that everyone wants like the biggest, like the flashiest move, and obviously what Chris Underwood did, there's like probably the biggest moment of Edge of Extinction. And so I think what the jury really wanted, especially when it's a final three of not so really flashy players and also under the radar players, I think they really wanted one of them to make some kind of flashy move to seal the deal against Jesse, but no one really had done that. So yeah, it was extremely unfair, and I think like Survivor's less about the challenges now. I think that's probably the only thing about having a lot of super fans on, because like players like Cody, for example, really, and Ryan really respect challenges as well. So I think it's having like a good diverse of some super fans and just some really great characters. Like when's the next coach? You get what I mean? We need coach back.
100%. I mean, it's been a while. We thought that maybe Cody could be the next coach in the beginning, just how bigger, larger than life he was, but then he kind of faded away towards the end game. Jay here says, do you guys think that the jury was bitter? In the exit interviews, it seems like they were bitter. I do think that there was definitely a sense of that. I mean, obviously we saw that conversation happening between Carla and Cassidy on the beach when, Carla couldn't convince Cassidy to do what she wanted her to do. And maybe Carla was used to getting her way with Cassidy. Cassidy was always the second or third in line person in that alliance, and Carla was the driver with James, right? And that's why she said, well, listen, we're going to put, instead of backing you as the person I've worked with the closest throughout the game, I'm going to poison the jury against you when I go there. Now, I've always said, why don't people use this strategy to try and stay in the game? I think this has been a good learning curve for myself not to use this, because it doesn't look great on you at the end of the day. Even though she did end up following through with that threat, maybe Cassidy should have done what Dolores has said here. She says, I think Carla was a wee bit bitter. Cody, I am not sure. He had a weird look on his face. There was another one that she said where, here we go. This one here. Cassidy should have called Carla out the night she was voted out by saying that Carla was going to go and poison the jury. That way the jury was prepared for it as Carla goes to the jury. What do you guys think about it? Was the jury bitter? What did you think about the Carla Cassidy conversation, Jake?
Personally, I don't think the entire jury was bitter. It was interesting to see that like in their exit interviews, Jesse and Carla seemed to be very like with the whole fire making challenge, like so adamant that like that was what won us over. And it seems like that they are being a bit contradictory in some of their statements about why they wanted or why they voted for Gabler and why they didn't vote for Cassidy. To me, it just seemed like they liked Gabler. Like
exactly.
Like just say
listen,
that. Yeah.
Isn't Gabler exactly what we used to like? Whenever someone like a Natalie White wins, people say, "Well, Natalie didn't do as much as Russell, but she was likable. She played the social game. She did great jury management." Mm-hmm. Why are we not giving Gabler the same credit? Why are we not saying he had excellent jury management and people just liked him more? Because at the end of the day, Mucky, you're going to vote for your friend at the end of the day. Obviously you want someone who has made some moves, but Gabler also articulated the moves that he did make in the game. I thought maybe a little bit better. Maybe Gabler even had one of the best final tribal council performances we've seen in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you've got the jury laughing in a good way, then you pretty much know that you're going to win, right? I think that the social game is far more important than the strategic and the physical, especially in the new era as well, with alliances changing all the time, different voting blocks happen. If you're kind of in the know and you're part of all the different groups and you're somehow at the end, they're more likely going to vote for you. Like, you don't really need to have like a lot of massive moves, just as long as you can kind of say, I did one thing, then all you need to do is just have the jury like you. So the social game is definitely the most important, I think, of the three aspects of Survivor.
Yeah, I think it's so important. It's definitely the most important thing at the end of the day. Doesn't matter how good of a player you are. We've seen it even in Australian Survivor in recent seasons, where I personally think King George of Australian Survivor played one of the best strategic games we've ever seen in any franchise of Survivor. The guy goes to the end and doesn't get the votes because they like the person who went up against them that much more. And not that that person wasn't a worthy winner. They also did a lot of good stuff. But again, it just shows you it doesn't matter how good of a player you are and how good you are strategically, people will vote for who they like in this game. It is a popularity contest at the end of the day. That's why I think like another interesting thing is we spoke about challenge wins being so important for some people, but yet I think if Jesse got to the end, he would have made a clean sweep without winning a single challenge, Jake. And I think it would have been the first time that we've had a winner since maybe Tommy Sheehan that has not gone on to actually win an individual immunity in a season.
I think you're right. Yeah, and Tommy didn't find any advantages or anything.
No.
I feel like it might be the last time that happens for a while.
Very
Did Marianne
old school win
immunity?
Yeah.
I feel like she won one. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she didn't.
Marianne.
She found an idol. Did she win immunity? I don't know actually.
Well, someone in the live let us know if Marianne did win an immunity or not. But Jesse's game was so good. And I think another part of this for a lot of the fans out there that watched this season, they were invested in Jesse's story. And I was listen, in the order of who I wanted to win going into this finale, Jesse was my number one. And then Gabler, I really liked. And I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I really like Gabler. And he didn't do anything for any of the hate or any of the discredit that he's getting online. In fact, he did a very good thing at the end of this. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. But, I really wanted Jesse to win because I was invested in his story. He was playing for his family. He was making the moves that he needed to make. And he was playing one of the best strategic games. I think probably a top 10 winner game if he actually got to the end and won this season. And I feel like for a lot of people, it was a double gut punch because they lost Jesse so close to the end. And then a lot of people really wanted Cassidy to win because they like seeing that underdog, under the radar female win. For me personally, I love steak, but sometimes I also like pizza. I like to mix it up a little bit. And for me, getting a third winner that was exactly the same would have been very boring. Personally, I'm very happy we saw a different winner this time. But, talking about this, Jesse as a whole, Jake, how did you feel about seeing Jesse get so close and just not making it at the end?
It was it was tough to watch. Just seeing him break down afterwards. But it was. I just expected it. I just was like, I just can't see this guy making it to the end. Once I saw when he was practicing fire, it just seemed like he wasn't good. And once I saw that it was Gabler going up against him, I just knew, Gabler, he's gonna beat him. So kind of expected it, but it was really hard just knowing, his story and just how much he wanted this and how much it would have helped him. So, and he played an amazing game too. So that just would have been the cherry on top.
I think if there's anything in Jesse's game, and obviously it shows you how difficult it is to win Survivor. It is not easy because you go in with a preconceived idea. Juries like the person who sits back and makes the moves towards the end of the game and who's nice to people. But then again, you go up there with people who maybe that season respects very cutthroat gameplay, and you play this more passive game that they don't respect. You don't know until you're out there what people are going to actually value when you get to the end of the game. And a player like Jesse being so good at the strategy, being so good at convincing people to do things, but two things he didn't do well. Firstly, managing his threat level towards the end game, which is hard to get right. I'm not judging him too much on it because you need to have a case in front of the jury, but you also may want to ask, did he need to make some of the flashy moves he did in the way that he did because it ended up cutting his time short in the game? And then secondly, not being able to win some individual form of immunity or competition when he needed it most, Mucky. What was your thoughts on Jesse as a player this season?
I really liked Jesse. I think it was definitely him and Owen were probably the two massive favourites from the preseason going in. And yeah, I thought Jesse played magnificently. But my only thing with Jesse, which I've definitely spoken about with you, Chris, as well, so I felt like it was too obvious of a winner really early on in the merge as well. I think it was around the split tribal kind of episode, I had a really strong feeling that Jesse was going to win. And it wasn't that I wasn't rooting against him. I was just kind of hoping that it's not just such an obvious win. Like even with Tony and when it's at war, I feel like definitely after the safety move, it was kind of like, yeah, there's definitely a strong chance he wins. But how can he get to the end? Surely Tony can't win a second time. So there's always that sort of question. Whereas Jesse, I feel like since no one was really targeting him, no one was really looking at him, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is so obvious. So as much as I was really shocked to see him lose and that someone else won, I did feel quite sad as well to see him come up just so short. He played a really great game.
Yeah. Christina Chong, finally got you live. Welcome to the live, Christina. Always glad to have you here in the lives with us as well. Christian says Tommy Sheehan had one immunity win in his season, so I wasn't aware of that. My memory isn't the best. No, Marianne never won immunity, so Marianne was the last one. So it happened quite recently, actually, with someone winning without an immunity win. So again, it's like I said, it's so many different things that different people, at the end of the day, favor when they vote for a winner, but ultimately they want to vote for someone that they really enjoy. Survivor Now podcast, also here in the live. Welcome, saying, what's up, guys? Love the breakdowns. Keep dishing out amazing content. Ditto right back at you, Survivor Now podcast. Keep dishing out some great content on your end as well. By the way, for those that are in the live, for those that are watching this later on, I am doing a Nullified Take award show for this year's Survivor content for Survivor 2022. It includes Survivor South Africa Return of the Outcast, Australian Survivor Blood vs. Water, and both Survivor 42 and 43. Make sure you check out the video on my channel. It's got a link to the form, and we're doing a survey on who do you think played the best game this season, who was your favorite player, which season was the best. We're doing a Hall of Fame and a bunch of other things. But prior to going live on this one, we had 99 people already participate in that. So hopefully we can crack 100 after this, and we can continue to get more feedback. There's some interesting results coming out, and we will be talking about that within the next week or so here on the channel. But back here to the finale episode, another person who was a really big player this whole season, and in the pre-merge, heading into the merge, I thought she could win. I thought she was one of the best players we've seen in a long time, was Carla, Jake. But Carla's game also fell short here in the finale, sadly trying to convince Cassidy and some of the others to turn in against Jesse, trying everything to try and stay in the game, but she had too big of a target on her back. Where does Carla sit for you, and do you feel the same animosity towards her that some of the online community at the moment is feeling because she ended up voting against Cassidy?
No, I don't feel like super bitter towards her. Like I just don't get how people have so much like time to be so upset about these types of things. Like it's just a show. It's just a TV show, man. Like people, these jurors can vote for whoever they want for any reason they want, even if it's stupid. You can be upset at the reasoning, but just keep it civil, man. And Carla was a really great player this season. I'm glad she was on the season. I'd love to see her back. I feel like towards the end, she did kind of lose her footing, and she was kind of like trying to just scrape her way back up. She really and she was like injured. Like she had that like challenge where like she was like, oh, my hands are going numb. Like her ankle was busted. Like her like finger got busted. Like, yeah, she just had a lot of things going wrong for her. So no, I have no animosity towards Carla. I'm glad she was on the season.
Yeah, I mean, and she gets one last hurrah in this episode. She figures out the word puzzle before everybody else, gets a little bit of an advantage going into one of the immunities, but sadly, it's not enough to carry her to another immunity win this season. But she did also win an immunity in one of the toughest ones we've seen, absolutely breaking the water challenge, Maki. How impressive was that to see? And what did you think of Carla's performance throughout the season as a whole?
Yes, so definitely with the water challenge, that is one of my favorite all-time challenges and one that I would love to do one day. But I think the only issue with that challenge is that you shouldn't do it out in the middle of like an ocean. You should do it more closer towards like the beach, so that way, even if the tide does go down, there's still more waves consistently going over top. Maybe not as like large, but still like you'll still get small waves coming through. But definitely with Carla, I really liked Carla. I wasn't too big on Carla when everyone's like, oh, she's like the best player this season, like a great, like she's like the GOAT. But I did enjoy Carla throughout the season, and I agree with you, Jake. Definitely towards the end, she started to lose a lot of her footing, and she spent definitely the last few episodes like really just scrapping and trying to find some footing in the game because she was definitely losing it really fast. And I think it came down to James getting voted out. Once James got voted out, she kind of started losing a lot of agency. People were targeting her. She had to win immunity, and Cody almost blindsided her like really well. If it wasn't for Jesse blindsiding Cody, she would have gone with an idol in her pocket at the final 6. So
yeah, she definitely got outplayed towards the end of the game. She had a very strong start, and I feel like a lot of things started going wrong for her when she lost her right-hand person in James, who clearly was a big part of her game as well, and maybe we just didn't see enough of that relationship between them as they were making... we saw a little bit, I guess, between the two of them, but I really feel like when she let James go willingly without trying to save him when she had an idol in her pocket, she kind of lost a lot of the numbers that she needed to make moves on her own terms within the game. Survivor Now podcast here says we had some amazing seasons this year. Don't know how to pick just one player from this year. I know it's really tough, but try and do it if you can. It's all in a bit of fun, and it's very interesting to see people's opinions as well on that. Dolores says, I like Carla right down to where she no longer was in charge and in the know. Her threat to Cassidy was borderline bully. I agree. I didn't really appreciate it. Listen, I understand you get desperate in the game and you're going to try, but the fact is that I feel like I hope that they made up afterwards, or she was like, listen, I didn't actually base my vote based on just the fact that you outsmarted me in the game, because that would be bad. Like, if you cannot, this is a game, and I understand feelings get hurt and it's a lot of money that's at stake, but at the end of the day, it is a game. You had no money to go in there when you started. So in reality, did you really lose $1 million when you never had it in the first place, Jake?
That's a really good point. Yeah.
So Sandy here says it's so weird Carla and Noelle got so many hate because how she voted, where there's other 5 people who voted. Gabler, this is something we need to just really touch on very quickly. There's these opinions out there because a lot of guys ended up going to the end. The same thing happened with Blood vs. Water, Australian Survivor Blood vs. Water, where we'll celebrate the Black Widow alliance when a female alliance dominates. And I know it doesn't happen very often, but we've also had not that many out-and-out male alliances dominate in recent seasons from memory. But when men do come together and do well, and they weren't even together, it's just a lot of these women played themselves out of the game. There's this hatred towards men succeeding in the game. And then there's also this whole thing about women being held at a higher standard if they don't vote for another woman. Just because you share the same sex does not mean you need to vote for that person. Vote for the person who played the best game. I don't understand that opinion out there at the moment and why it's out there, but on this podcast, and at least I don't agree with it. I like seeing different outcomes. I don't want to see men dominate every single season. I don't want to see women dominate every single season, but Survivor's been on for 43 seasons and we've had a lot of different outcomes, Jake.
Yeah, I liked how Cassidy addressed this in her final tribal council. She brought up how, she felt it was like a testament to her game that she was able to be the last woman standing. And she made it a point to say it wasn't anyone's fault and it wasn't like intentional, but, there were a lot of women that got taken out early. And so that just made it tougher for the women later in the game. And so I was glad to see that it wasn't made into something that it shouldn't have been.
Yeah, and she didn't take it that way as well. And I agree. Listen, I don't disagree that it's probably very hard for Cassidy. I said kind of like, Cassidy didn't really run a move, or she wasn't like the main person doing something. I'm sure for Cassidy, it's hard when she's got alpha male like Cody to talk to him and say, Cody, I want you to move this way. Because Cody's going to be like, no, I'm going to go this way. Right. I get that. I'm not oblivious and blind to that. It was definitely harder for her to get to the end, and there should be some credit given for that. But what I don't understand is that people think that everything has got like a hidden meaning, or there's so much more to everything, when sometimes, there will be more men at the end. Sometimes there'll be more women. Sometimes a woman will win. Sometimes a man will win. Let's just get on with it. If this becomes a trend where we consistently see it, call it out. But sometimes I feel like we just call things out for the sake of calling it out, Mucky.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite a tricky subject to definitely talk about. But I do think there's definitely that misbalance on if like men are running the game is not highlighted as much, as actually looked down more upon, whereas if women were to run the game, it's very like a lot of praise. And and I've even noticed like a lot of times as well, like if a woman is like a early boot, there's a lot of like bring this person back, bring this person back. Like Justine, for example, I've seen a lot of posts
Yeah,
regarding
and I
Justine should
will
come
call
back.
it.
Yeah.
I will call it out the other way as well. Like I don't
Mm.
like that we praise and then talk down on men versus women doing certain things. But
Yeah.
then the other side of the coin is when a woman is playing a really good game and she's dominating, it doesn't always get shown. Like that's the
Yeah,
other part
that
of it
as
as
well.
well, where sometimes a woman alliance will do really well, and you're like, well, it's not as exciting a win at the end because you don't feel like you saw as much, like an Erica winning, for instance, you know. So it definitely works both ways, and I get why there's always the conversation around it. But I just think again, calling these things out both ways makes sense to me. Let's not look at it from one side. Let's try and do better on both sides of the coin at the end of the day, because we want it to be about the game. We want it to be about Survivor. We want it to be about the best player winning at the end of the day. And we want to celebrate the success that these people have when they're out there, instead of being, like Jake said, bitter and having the time to be bitter and calling out the women because the women like Noelle or Carla didn't vote for Cassidy. Just because they're women as well does not mean they have to vote for Cassidy. It's my point, you know. They should be voting for who they think played the best game at the end of the day. Dolores here says, if you were playing, would you want to be voted out before jury, at the very beginning of the jury, or one of the last players to become juror? I think there's some benefits to being an early juror. That's a very interesting point, because the earlier you get voted out, the more information you do get from different people as they come in. Where if you're the last person voted out, like a Jesse, I don't know how much time he gets to download on what happened. But in Jesse's case, he kind of was the person who had all the information. So it probably didn't distract from him so much. I think if I was to play, I would always want to go deeper in the game if possible than go out early. And that's just because of the competitive nature. But I do feel like being voted out early might help you make a more informed decision sometimes on who to vote for to win. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, if you're a later juror, then like you're kind of in that game mode for longer, and you kind of got to see the game dynamics for longer. Whereas if you're an early juror, you aren't in that game mode for, can be up to a long time, that you're just at Ponderosa and all you see is a couple hours every day or every other day at Tribal Council, and all you're really hearing is people talking in circles, not really saying how they feel, because Tribal Council is just it's just a show, just theater for Jeff. So I feel like I would probably lean more towards being a later juror.
Yeah, same. I feel like, the deeper you go, like the better. And I think especially if you're, let's say, like the last stream member going in, then you can always hold it to yourself on, oh, the what if I was so close on winning, and I'd much rather have that than be like, yeah, no shot of of winning. So just a personal ego thing. But yeah, I'd much rather that. Yeah.
Jay here says, yep, Carla said that they got verification on the Final Threes game from Jesse after he got voted out, since he had so much info on everyone, because he was sort of, I think, running the game for most of it. But let's talk a little bit about this fire-making challenge. Obviously, the editors tried their best to convince us that Gabler could potentially lose this, because there was the whole confessional about him feeling very tired and malnutrition, and he doesn't know if he's going to be able to make it, which has been a storyline on Gabler for a while this season. It's really weird in hindsight when you now know that he did go the full distance. He didn't get medevac. He didn't starve out there, and he did win the whole season. It's kind of weird looking back on it, but they try to bring that doubt in our minds if he could pull it together. But Gabler goes out and creates an absolute new record on doing this. He beats Chris Underwood's time of 4 minutes, and I believe 50 seconds, and he does it in 4 minutes and 9 seconds, the fastest fire-making challenge ever out there. How impressed were you to see Gabler pull it out here, Jake? Were you excited about it? I mean, obviously it's sad to see Jesse go, but it's pretty cool to see a new record being smashed out there.
Yeah, it was cool. Personally, I just don't find fire making challenge very entertaining. It's just really just the result that I'm, worried about. Building a fire and burning a rope is not that riveting to me personally. But yeah, it was cool to see, because I remember they made pretty big deal of it, that like both Chris and Devins made it super fast, because Devins was like right behind Chris.
Jeff loves
and-
this. He loves the
Yeah.
fire making, guys. If you're thinking fire making challenge is going anywhere, it's not going anywhere. Jeff
No,
loves the
absolutely
fire
not.
making challenge
Which
for
is-
this very reason,
Yeah.
because he can hype it up. There's
Yeah.
something else for them to show in the finale, which I'd much rather see strategy. I'd much rather see how does Jesse get himself out of a sticky situation, trying
Right.
to get into like a final 3. I'm a big fan of final 2s. I always have been. So I mean, I would even go there because they made it a final 3 to help out the player who's always like the fallen angel, and then they get another chance to be in the final 3, and then they're like, oh, okay, cool. They've now moved the fallen angel to the final 4, so now we need to bring the fire making. You've got to ask yourself what's next, because the final
There's now going to be a final 5 rock draw.
something like that, because every time they're like, oh, if we just bring it one move earlier, we're going to get our fallen angel into the final, and it's not going to work. People work around these things, and it's why maybe fire making challenge should be there some seasons, maybe it shouldn't be there other seasons, maybe it should be final 2 some seasons, maybe it should be final 3 some seasons, and keep it a secret from the contestants so they don't know how to plan for it, and they're like, oh, something different could happen here, and we need to think about things outside of the box. I don't know. But yeah, Gabler ultimately does win. He's very humble throughout all of this, and Jesse has a moment where it was really heartbreaking to see him sort of, break down after all of this. He put a lot of effort into it, but sadly he's not going to make it all the way through to the final tribal council. Now, the thing for me that was quite interesting is that Cassidy had to make this move, and, we're quite, again, is a double standard that I'm going to call out. We're all critical of Xander not being aware of how Erica was perceived and how she could potentially win. But yet we're not being critical of Cassidy and Owen and how they didn't perceive Gabler as a threat throughout the season. It seemed like they were really in the dark and had the complete wrong read on the jury, and the fact that Gabler actually had a really good shot at winning this thing at the end, Mucky. Why is that double standard once again there? It feels like there's a lot of double standards around this win.
Well, I know that once again this is like also a very touchy subject as well, but I recall listening to Danny's deep dive on one of the podcast YouTube channels, and Danny mentioned how Shan went really hard against Xander, because obviously this is the first season after COVID, this is the first season after the horrible George Floyd incident, and I think no matter what, season 41 was not going to have another like tall, buff, straight white male winner, and I think Shan went really hard against Xander for obviously because he was part of like the blind side of Shan, like Danny, Indiana, like all 3 black players going up back to back, and I think Danny was saying that Shan like really put all of that onto Xander as well.
What
as
podcast was this? Was this on Rob as a podcast or
Survivor Specialists?
Oh right, okay, I should go and check that out.
And so I think that along with that, like I think Xander, he basically just had no idea about the jury management in terms of all that sort of views going in as well. So I think with him underestimating Erica, because we all have our own perspectives, I think if you're Xander, you're a massive underdog, been underdog since the pre-merge. And I think, I personally saw Xander's winning going into the final 3, but I was thrown off as well. So
I thought Xander did enough that season, but I mean, I think what I'm trying to get at is that people judged Xander and said, he was less worthy because he didn't have that read. But yet people aren't saying Cassidy and Owen is less worthy for not having a good read on Gabler. That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think,
should we be criticizing the fact that their read wasn't there and that Gabler was actually a lot more popular than what they thought? They thought that Gabler was going to be a joke at the end.
Yeah, I do think that that also when you look throughout the season, Gabler had a lot of moments, like the shot in the dark at the start, like putting the palm fronts and people on the middle of the night. He definitely had a lot of moments where socially he wasn't very aware of things. And I think the reason why he was part of so many different alliances was because I think a lot of people genuinely did see him as like a goat, kind of to just drag to the end with them. Because think about like, Jesse, Cody, power players. He was with Owen and Sammy. Sammy's a power player. Owen's a super fan. He was with Carla. She's a massive power player. So I felt like everyone thought he was a goat that they can just drag to the end, but it just became more of all the big players end up getting taken out, and he was able to use the fact he was with everyone as a great strategy for him to win. So,
yep, that's an interesting point. Jay here says, I think the difference is that Xander was told specifically by Heather that Erica was a huge threat to win and still took her to the end. Anyway, and even Heather brought it up at the final tribal. So that's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
I kind of missed that, and that explains it a little bit more for me as well.
Yeah, and another thing too is like it wasn't just Heather too. Like it was a common theme that season where they were saying like we need to get Erica out. She's a huge threat. She's dangerous. Blah 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 blah. Like Deshaun mentioned it a million times. Shan brought it up. Like we need to get Erica out. I believe the episode that Shan went home, she was trying to target Erica because she thought that she was a threat, and Xander just saw that and said, "Nah." You know, I'm not saying that like Cassidy and Owen should get a complete pass,
complete free pass, yeah.
You know, because obviously, you know, Gabler smoked them in the jury vote.
Nearly had a perfect game. 0 votes. 0 votes casted against this guy the whole season. 0 votes, guys. Let that sink in. And if he had James vote for him, he would have been only the 3rd player in Survivor history in the US to get a complete game, like after Jeremy and JT, I think. Is the other 2 people who had no votes against them and all the jury votes?
Cochran
as well. Okay, yeah. So it would have just been an insane game, no matter what. Yeah. It would have been an absolute insane game if he got there. I still give mad props to the guy for the fact that clearly his threat level management was so great. Did any of you guys get annoyed when Cassidy, in the middle of Final Tribal Council, started asking Gabler more questions to throw him under the bus? So he was pitching the whole thing about, you know, I've had 0 votes against me. And Cassidy is like, yeah, well, do you think it's because no one took you serious?
I think that she kind of started to see
where the momentum was going.
Where the momentum was going. And so she tried to switch it over. So I get why she did it. You know, that can come off as, you know, Chris Underwood actually did the same thing. Gavin actually brings that up at their final tribal about how he, you know, was never targeted and never had his name written down. And Chris, I think, pretty much asked the same thing verbatim. Was that because, you know, nobody saw you as a threat because you were a follower in the game? And actually, I remember some of the jurors got like offended by that.
I listen. I would have been. I wouldn't have liked.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have liked it if I was a jury member and a final tribal council person was like, "Hey, am I not asking the questions here? Why are you asking the questions?
Also,
we're judging you."
I want to bring up something. I know that like Gabler, you know, I'll say it again. Gabler absolutely deserved his win. But there was one moment at Final Tribal where I was like, what? So Sammy asks Gabler if he was planning to go to the end with
that was
Cody
a bad one. Yeah.
And Jesse. And he like kind of talks in circles, kind of gives a word salad for
but he also said he also said he was going to stay with Ride or Die, and I was like, that's not the right answer.
Yes,
that's not the right answer.
That's what I was going to say. He gives a bit of a word salad, and then finally at the end, he's like, so yes, the plan was to go to the end with Ride or Die. I'm like, you were planning to go to the end with Cody and Jesse, and you just told them that? And they didn't even care. They just ignored it. And so
it's like, whatever.
That's a moment where I was like, okay, maybe there's a bit of, you know, credit to the whole like the jury was biased thing.
I think both Cassidy and Gabler made mistakes. I think Cassidy's biggest mistake was not being able to call out a move that she orchestrated, and that she tried to claim a move that other people actually started before her. I think that was the bad move for her. So I think the fact that they both had a bad answer kind of equaled it out, and it came back to, okay, well, who do we think had the most control at times, or who was the person we liked the most, which is Survivor. It always is going to be Survivor. Let's talk a little bit about, because I'm aware of our time here as well, let's talk a little bit about Gabler's move at the end. Mucky, for the first time ever, we had a winner win $1 million and donating 100% of this towards veterans in need. What was your thoughts about this? And I find it insane that people can still hate on this guy after doing something so selfless.
You know, it's honestly awesome, honestly. And I can't believe, like, it's taken 43 seasons for someone to actually be willing to do that. And I think, you know, I was actually laughing with a few friends because I had a friend of mine watched the finale with me last night. And we made the joke on, imagine like his wife and kids watching this at home and hearing him say, I'm going to donate it all to this thing. They're like, you did what? Like, but I think it's I think it's so selfless, and yeah, I think it's definitely like a great like probably like one of the biggest heroes now of the new era.
I think he's going down in history just because of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like we spoke about this, Jake. I said, if Jesse wins, great season. We'll probably remember it as Jesse's season. He would be a top 10 winner. There's no arguing with that. But I said, if you want to make this season memorable, because season 41, 42, 43, when you're in season 76, who's going to remember what season 56, what happened in 56? Because it's also generic now. I think 43 will remember that as the season where $1 million was given away to charity for veterans in need. Both myself and Mucky, we're not Americans, right?
Mhm.
But I think it's such an admirable thing to do. And I think that in today's society, we don't respect our elders sometimes enough. There's a lack of respect. There's a lack of looking after the people who look after us in the world. And, the funny thing about America, when you look at it, America really is the watchdog of the world when it comes to keeping order around the globe and making sure that there is some sort of control, because if things go haywire, you always know that Big Brother America is out there that can keep an eye on things. But there's a lot of people, if you take the politics out of it, there's a lot of real people out there on the front line giving their lives to create the safety that all of us can enjoy daily. The fact that we can sit here in a comfort of our own home on a computer that works, have this conversation, I found it really heartwarming to see someone actually look out for that community. It doesn't seem like that America itself, and I don't want to judge because I think it's probably the same problem in a lot of other countries. They do enough to look after these people when they come back from war, basically. So, Jake, what was your thoughts as an American seeing someone do this?
Oh, I thought it was amazing. Personally, other Americans may not have experienced this, but if I drive around and I see a homeless person with like a cardboard sign, 99% of the time it says that they're a veteran, that they just got back from wherever and they can't find a job, and they're always so humble. They're always so just it's just seeing that all the time. There's one specific guy right by right by the grocery store by my house that I see all the time, and he just has this little American flag. He has like a little tiny American flag that he plants kind of in the ground next to him where he lays, and just has a sign. And I just see that every day, and so I immediately thought of him when I saw this, and I totally agree with you. What you said, your perception that that our country doesn't really do enough for these people, especially what they deserve, given what they've gone through for us. That the selflessness that they've given. So I thought this was amazing, and it just was a nice kind of conclusion to Gabler talking about this throughout the season too. And I also read on Reddit, somebody was at a watch party where Ben Driebergen was at the same watch party, and he was able to break the news to Ben. He was in a conversation while Gabler announced that, so he didn't hear it. And this guy went up to him and broke the news to him, and he said that you could see it on his face, like it just touched him, and he was just like, he couldn't believe it, and he was just so grateful. So,
and Gabler I think why it hasn't happened is because we've had some people in the past win the money that really needed the money because they were maybe in positions where they couldn't do it. Jeff did ask the question, are you rich? Are you well off? And Gabler said, listen, I've done decent in life. I've made good choices. So I feel like I can do this, but I'm not like mega rich or anything like that. I think him working in the operating room, hopefully he's on a good place that he can afford to do this. He never had the million until he won it, like we said earlier here in the podcast. So to do this, absolute insanity. That's all I'm going to say. I've got mad respect for Gabler. Based on this alone, I want to see Gabler come back and play again and get another shot at the $1 million. I kind of felt like Survivor should have done the right thing and said, listen, if you're going $1 million and we're going $1 million in as well. That's kind of what I felt like Jeff should have done in this case, because it's so unprecedented for someone to do this. I kind of feel like Survivor should have backed this up as well. It shouldn't take a contestant to do this. The show should be backing this initiative as well. So what a great way to end the season. But we do have some unfinished business here, Jake, that we need to go through. We had a draft running this whole season. I have been on Struggle City for a while when it comes to this draft. It's not been going my way. And I came limping into this final scenario here. So let's have a look and see where I'm currently sitting in regards to who I've got left. So we came into the final. Those were the teams coming into the final. I had Lone Soldier, Owen coming into this. You had everybody. Obviously, Carla ended up going first, then Jesse. So we ended up with at least both of us having people in the finale that we could root for. But score-wise, for the season, let's have a look. Winner ended up being Mike Gabler, so that gave you 50 points off the rip. The runner-up ended up being Cassidy, so that gave you 25 points. Most confessions went to Jesse for the season. Jesse ended up with 60 confessions, beating out Owen for actually Carla. Carla and Owen both about 55 and 56. They were actually quite high as well. Most individual immunities was Cassidy and Owen. Most advantages found ended up being Carla and Cody. And then least votes casted against them was Gabler. So you ended up getting a whopping extra 100 points for that as well. Only got 50 points on the bonus category. So at the end, with your team, you ended up on 576 points, and I ended up on 393 points. You absolutely blitzed me at the end. Well done to Jake.
Yeah.
So, Mucky, that's the challenge for you now in Australian Survivors to keep me on the losing streak.
I definitely will.
I'm excited for season 44 for me to keep this going. Are you gonna? You said you're gonna make some changes, right?
100% going to make some changes to the draft. I think we've learned a lot by doing it. Survivor South Africa Return of the Outcasts happened so shortly before Survivor 43. I didn't really have much time to think and change things, but I believe Australian Survivor is at the end of January that's going to be live. So we've got a couple of weeks. I've got 2 weeks of leave coming up as well that I won't be doing any podcasting. So it gives you an opportunity to think creatively about how you want to change some things. Mucky's already given me a great idea. We won't talk about that on air in regards to one of the categories we might add in to Australian Survivor, because it's going to be classic Australian Survivor if we do end up putting that in for points as well. But really excited about that. And Jake, hopefully we get to see you come on as a guest for one of the recaps as well. Are you going to be watching Australian Survivor?
I'll try to, but just with university, it's just I'm so busy, especially now that I'm in my third year here. It can get pretty intense. So I will try, but
No, I mean, listen, I understand it. Australian Survivor is it's a sprint. it's everything in one. It's like 3-4 episodes sometimes in a week. It can get pretty intense. But if you're part of the community and you've never watched any Australian Survivor, consider jumping on it this season. It's going to be a heroes versus villains season. A bit weird because it's half returnee, half newbies. The people that are newbies to the game, they're all like celebrities or famous people in Australia that are like infamous for being either a hero or a villain, and that's why they're categorizing them in those tribes. But there's some really cool people coming back. We've got Nina, Sandra Diaz-Twine's daughter, coming back for a second time that season, and a couple of other exciting people as well. But that will probably be the biggest one for you. Dolores, we can't wait to have you in some of those lives, or even just commenting below if you can't catch us on the lives. Sandy saying next Australian Survivor have both Geordie and George, but if both confessional points will be interesting. Yeah, I think that it's going to be a mad dash to get the likes of some of these returning players coming back, Mucky, because we know they're going to be screen hogs.
But don't forget about the ultimate villain returning on Australian Survivor, Stevie Chow.
Stevie,
like you can't forget about him. Everyone thinks about George, David and Luke, but Stevie, he's the game changer.
See, either one.
I can't wait for Stevie to dominate.
From champions contenders, is that
the fourth boot? Yeah.
Yeah, King George is back on. So Dolores, not only is George on, Haley's back as well. So they basically
Wow.
George, Haley, and Flick. So all three, final
And
three
Simon.
from and Simon.
Yeah.
Can't forget about Simon. So it's going to be interesting. But that's it here for this season of Survivor. Jake and I will be definitely back to talk about Survivor 44. It looks exciting. We may have a very I guess, brief view already of someone that could get medevaced or injured just based on that trailer. Look pretty intense, but can't wait to talk about that when it comes out as well. For everybody that has followed us throughout the season, thank you so much. Consider subscribing now. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, consider liking the video as well. It does help with the YouTube algorithms. We'll continue to cover all of these shows that you love. And remember, even if you hate some of the comments that I brought up today, or you don't like what Mucky brought to the table, we understand. It's very hard to satisfy everybody in the Survivor community. We're just asking the hard-hitting questions, and we love taking a view on all the different things. Be it that you think that Gabler's win was the best win ever, we support you. Be it that you think Cassidy should have won, we support you. We don't care. Survivor belongs to all of us. To have opinions, that is awesome. I don't mind it. So, let us know in the comments, what did you agree with? What did you disagree with? Where were we too harsh? Where weren't we harsh enough? We always love hearing your feedback, and we'll continue to deliver some of the content that we've been delivering this season. Any final thoughts, any final words there from you, Jake, before we end this season off?
I think that's it.
I'm coming to you like Jeff. Jeff goes to Cody for everything. I'm coming back to you, Jake, for final words.
Long live the Gabler.
Long live the Gabler. And Mucky, will see you back shortly for Australian Survivor. Everybody in the live, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation, and catch you guys next time. Bye.